All right, today I'm going to do a short video on the three types of thermostat cooling systems in Homelites and Bearcats. Early motors had no thermostat whatsoever. Water was pumped into the block, pumped out through the exhaust manifold and out the exhaust. The second type had a kind of rudimentary thermostat, which would allow water to go more quickly through the block and exit out a bypass into a second port on the water pump. And as the engine warmed up, that would close and force more water through the block. And then the third kind was more of a metered flow that allowed water to completely bypass the engine until it warmed up, and then it would modulate open and closed dependent on the exhaust temperature and the water temperature coming through there that would open and close it to more finely meter and control the temperature. This right here is the earliest style exhaust and intake manifold. And as you can see here on the back of it, there is no provision for a thermostat whatsoever. If you look down at the bottom, it's got a very unrestricted exhaust flow. The guys that liked to race these preferred this manifold for, they believed, a slight increase in exhaust flow. And then if you look over here on the surface that goes with the head, there's a port right there that water passes into the exhaust manifold, and then two more ports where the water goes kind of back and forth through the block in order to get out with the exhaust. There's no temperature metering, so when the water is very cold, the engine will not come up to optimum operating temperature. Sludge can build up in the engine and things like that. So the second type was an early thermostat. You can see on the back of this manifold, it's got a thermostat housing and a tube that allows water to be pumped back to the water pump and just kind of go into a recirculation mode. Like the first manifold, this one has got the water ports in the exhaust manifold, letting water pump out. So this thermostat is simply allowing the water that's being pumped in here to exit very quickly, and as it comes up to operating temperature, it pushes more water back through the engine to absorb more heat. Up here, we've got the third and final form of the Bearcat. This was introduced with the Deluxe in the mid-60s. It has a hose that comes around the back, hooks up to the thermostat. When the engine reaches operating temperature, this closes, stopping the flow of water this way, forcing it through the engine, where it'll come out of the top of the starboard engine cover, be pumped through this hose, and then that jumps down into the exhaust. This exhaust manifold does not have the three water ports. So that's kind of important to note on that style of manifold. In this manifold style, it's really easy to bypass the cooling thermostat. You simply plug the hose. Voila, you've got full flow of water through the engine at all times. As parts for these are rare or no longer available, often that's what people do, is they just put a plug in that line or eliminate that line altogether, put a little cap on the end there, and you're all done. So mostly we're looking at, these are fairly reliable and probably are not going to need service very much, and most of the motors after 66 have got that on them. Many of the early motors were retrofitted with that style. Very few of the motors came with no thermostat at all. There were some other drawbacks to that, but the racers liked them. This is the one that is of main concern. If this is sticking, then water is not going to completely cool the engine, and you're going to have some overheating problems. It also has got a really pain in the rear end second tube, which goes down into the leg and adds in the difficulty of lining up the water pump when you're trying to put that gear case back on after changing an impeller. So the first thing we're going to do on this one is we're going to remove this entire thermostat, and we want to take the water that's coming out and allow it to recirculate, which is going to essentially convert this old manifold to function just like this manifold over here. And that is done by gutting the thermostat that's inside of it and putting just a plain blanking plate on it. With that bolted in place, instead of a thermostat, you will have full flow, no thermostat cooling on your motor. You can then eliminate that return line that is so frustrating to line up with the water pump down in the engine. This is the 3 different water pump styles that were used over the years. This is the first water pump for an engine with no thermostat, and this also became the last water pump. So it is recognizable because it only has one port where water is pushed up to the engine, and on the inside of it, there's just the one port. When they went to the first cooling system, you had a water pump that had 2 ports on it. And this one is going to be your pressure up into the engine, and this one is a return from the engine when the thermostat is allowing water to bypass. And you can see it's got the second hole there up in the top. So water comes up, pumped up to the engine, bypasses the engine when it's not warm, goes back down another tube into there and recirculates. And then in the interim, there was a service part, which is kind of a hybrid. It looks like it has 2 ports, but that return line is blocked. It can be popped open if somebody was running that first generation of thermostat, but being closed, it could be used on later motors. So it was a service part that worked for any of the 3 options. And then I've seen a lot of people talk about water pumps that are in pretty sad shape. These things are unbelievably brittle, but I just wanted to show you this guy. This was pumping. Anything with enough JB lube, as long as you can get the inside the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, that guy was still pumping water. So if you crack them, break them, there aren't any more being made. Don't throw them out. JB Weld is your friend. I got some others here that have got paint over spray or cracks or whatnot. So this one had bypass cooling, and then they put a rubber plug in here to block that second line so that it could be used for a non-thermostat model as well. So that's just some stuff about the difference in the water pumps. So if you put this block off plate that I mentioned and you block off and bypass the thermostat, you also want to plug that return line in your water pump. And then the tube that is in the leg that matches up with that one can just be removed or cut out. It doesn't need to be there. If you're looking at the bottom of your engine, if you were laying on your back and looking up at it, this has got just the tube going up to the engine, if it had the recirculating, there'd be a second tube right over here, and it kind of flops, the second tube flops around a little bit and is pretty darn hard to line up, and has been the cause of a number of broken water pumps over the years. So I just give you some idea there on those differences. So I hope that's been a help on your cooling system. Some other things that I would like to point out on these guys as you're considering bypassing your thermostat and just running straight through. This is a conversion that Ed Ewing had done. So you can see the water line comes up from the pan, and he's got the side cover on it, which has the water inlet at the top, but it works just as well if you've got a water inlet at the bottom. This motor had a late style thermostat on it, so all that was necessary was just blanking it off. It didn't need a spacer or anything inside there. He just put a plate on it, and that is bypassed a late model thermostat. If you bypass an early model thermostat, and this is where the return tube goes through. You want to plug that. If you take the tube out, or if the tube comes up in here, you can put a cap on it of some kind. But if this is missing, exhaust fumes will come up into the engine compartment and choke the engine, and you'll have an exhaust leak, and that is kind of under the block. You can't really see it, so ask me how I know, or search my other videos, and you'll see me struggling with an exhaust leak, and it was because that little guy right there was missing. Unfortunately, I did not have any engines in the shop that actually had the early cooling system. All of them were either parted out or already converted, and my manifolds on the shelf were the best I could do in explaining that. So I hope this comes in handy. Again, if you got that early thermostat, it really is it's not doing you much good, and Ed Ewing always bypassed the thermostats on them to keep the reliability of the engines up. So anyway, leave a comment if this helped you out at all. If you got any questions, I look forward to talking to you again soon.